Right, hi, I'm Tony, and clearly I'm just putting this on so that you know there's a face behind the voice. I did used to have hair, as some of these pictures may show. And what it's about is about my experience in my career, and some of the things that happened in the past are relevant for today, and things that we clearly do differently. But I hope you find it useful. So there's links with the past and the present. I think we can do things better. And for that, you just need a little bit of history. And that's what I'm hoping to remember and put in now, well, before I forget. Relevant to this stage in my career, there are 3 topics in a practice that I was at, but only, I think it was less than 8 months. And I kind of explain why through it, but we're going to talk about prevention, about diagnosis, and about general anaesthetics. And so I qualified in Cardiff, and I didn't really want to move. And I still lived in the same house with my student friends who were still students. They were medics. They had another year, and I'm the guy in the check shirt. And I think this could have been finals night, but quite frankly, it could have been any Friday night. We were very sociable. Anyway, so I found this practice quite late on, and I was encouraged to come to a practice in Caerphilly. But actually work in a branch practice, and that they would support me. Well, support is a funny word. Is that what at most I think they all did a half session with me through the week. So basically I was working on my own. And there are a couple of things that I remember, and clearly I wasn't enjoying it, but the first thing was we used to meet over lunchtime in a pub, and I was quite well behaved. I didn't drink, but they used to always have a pint. And he came in one day saying that at the end of NHS dentistry as we know it, because the maximum you could pay had gone from under £10 to £10. And you have to remember then it was an item of service, so whatever you had done, whether it was teeth out, lots of fillings, some gold crowns, which we used to do quite a few of, it was all for under £10, but now it's £10. The principal was saying that there's no way anyone's going to pay that anymore, not around here. Anyway, it wasn't the end of dentistry. But what he did say to me, and I'll go to the next one, but what he did say was they brought out added years. And he said, Tony, the NHS pension's really good. You can buy added years. And I was enjoying the job so much that I thought, I want to get out of this as soon as possible. I bought added years. And I don't think they do it now, but the NHS scheme was great. And it was, they made some mistakes in it, but it worked well for me. So I'm sorry if it hasn't worked well for you, but that was one of the good things. And the chap was called Mike Barton, and he was great but he was an academic. He really shouldn't have been, and I don't think he wanted to be working where he did. He wanted to be teaching people anatomy and stuff like that. He already knew more than me, and I'd just come straight out of uni. Anyway, we had one occasion whereby, as you would say, I was struggling with a wisdom tooth, and I needed help, and he was there, and so the nurse went and got him, and he came and he took out the 8 using a turbine, and I was mortified because it never occurred to me, because I thought you weren't allowed to do it because you get this emphysema. Well, I'd heard of it, but I've never come across a dentist that actually had one, so it's one of those things that you hear about, but how often do they occur? And the other part, which you can see on the right, it refers to the app that I made. And it was because back then, if people came in with disease that needed treating, as I was taught at the dental school, you need to get them to get their oral hygiene sorted first. And so I was doing a lot of oral hygiene instructions, saying, well, when you're doing it good enough, then we can do the treatment. And as Mike pointed out, he said, look, mate, if you don't do the treatment, you're not going to get paid. And we've got to pay our nurse. And so you started doing some work. And the system has always been bad, but every year it seems to have got worse. And we were encouraged to do work, and that's difficult for any business. It's a bit of a compromise. And what happened was that one of the principals came in one day to the pub and said, oh, Tony, I saw a patient of yours that you said was okay. He said, and I've just done 3 MODs in half an hour, and you need to be doing a few more fillings. And I thought, that's odd. So I went back to look at the x-rays, and I thought, you know what, I can't see any interproximal caries here. And, you know, I wasn't good at most things, but I was all right. But x-rays, I was always quite good at. And yeah, so that was a bit disturbing. As you can see, the x-ray on the left, that's a digital x-ray. So it's well, it's not a good x-ray. You can see there's a bit of coning gone on there. And yeah, and I did that. But I didn't do the treatment. That treatment was done 20 years ago in the dental hospital. So it worked. Yeah, well, you know where I'm coming from with that. Right, so, and that's what people were doing around that period to make lots of money. Australians, it was also New Zealand, and it was also Brits. But, you know, if you could do really quick treatment and get paid a lot of money. The interesting thing was, I remember a few years later at the dental school meeting a consultant pediatric dentist, complaining that some dentists were doing extremely small amalgam fillings and getting paid for them. And I thought, oh, that's a terrible thing. But after a while you realise that, well, they didn't have fissure sealants back then. And actually what they were doing wasn't too bad, because they were cleaning out the fissure and putting in an amalgam. And in 20 years' time, when the filling fell out, they were probably self-cleansing anyway. So it was far better than waiting till they got masses of decay and then doing the filling. So you need to know. And the other thing about x-rays is this. So this is what I did recently. And so we won't play it all, but if you go onto YouTube and you look this up, I think it's under, I don't know, I can't remember what I put under really, but you'll find it anyway. So it's probably under DCP stuff, but there's about 10 playlists there. And it's using the scanners. And some of these scanners now, they actually show you if there's any disease. Yes, have a look at that. But the other part is that with radiographs, they actually do better diagnosis now than a dentist. And we need to consider those aids. So there would have been no doubt between myself and the principal about, you know, if there was decay there or not, should the filling have been done or not. When it comes to treating disease, then we should be using these devices. Yeah, so this is, if you're looking at the video, then there's a picture there showing where the decay is. And that's on the scanner. And these things will only get better. You know, we know that. That's what's happened. When I had my scanner, it wasn't in colour. And it was a lot more. And this is what we're talking about. You could actually, yeah, I'm interested in care homes. Why not go with your scanner, or get someone else to go with your scanner, go around a care home, do some good. But anyway, moving on, and dentistry has moved. So this was just about, I think it was just saying that nowadays we treat what people want. They're two Liverpool players no longer with us, but yeah, and the chap that does the work, it's excellent work, but we need to be helping just for the dentists that actually are treating disease and treating the general public. Not everybody can afford this kind of treatment, and certainly the treatment, when they've had the treatment, they have to pay more for maintaining it than if they've never had the treatment. You know, these things don't last forever, but no one tells them that. And yes, so the other part, the main reason for me leaving the practice was I had to do a GA session. So it says here about someone who died, and this person died in a hospital. So this was 2020. So people still die having general anaesthetic for dentistry, and it's in the news a lot. Well, I had a GA session, as you'd say, in the main practice in Caerphilly, and I think I saw about 16 in under 2 hours taking out teeth for children. Taking out children's teeth rather, and it was horrific. And at that, you know, my parents still lived on Anglesey, and after that I went to Anglesey in the car, and I remember I just had the worst headache ever, and it was just horrific. And I thought, I'm not doing that again. And I thought, I'll just have to move. Anyway, so they stopped giving anaesthetics. So that would have been in 1982. Actually, it would have been in 83 because it was sort of February, and I left in March. But it shows the figures back then. So I underlined how many were done. And so it was over 1 million in the mid-70s.
1 million, and these were general anaesthetics done in general practice, right? And it shows how many deaths there were, and clearly we don't want deaths, but they still happen in the hospital. I certainly don't think we should be doing GA sessions in a practice unless you've got an anaesthetist there who gives them more than 2 minutes to be anaesthetised. But the figures are interesting when you look at them. But yeah, I decided I can't do this, I'm going to have to leave. And yeah, so these are the figures from last year. Right? And it shows how many tooth extractions were done, as you can see there, highlighted there. So there are two things of interest. One is that there was 1 million in the 70s, and they were done in practice. This is how many were done in hospital environment. So things, that's a bit odd. And then when you look at the below, it says that there are 5 times more done extractions done in Yorkshire and Humber compared to the East Midlands. Well, there's your evidence for fluoridation. So we need to be supporting one another, and we need to be promoting that. We can't go under the whim of, what's it called? These, I've forgotten the name. But we can't give in to people who are, the anti-vaxxers, shall we say. In the end, we have to have a consensus, and we're looking after the most vulnerable. And the interesting thing here is when it looks at the top countries for oral healthcare, we're actually 4th. And that's 4th from the top. Well, it shows like 4th from the bottom. It's kind of in reverse order, so it'd be a bit of a giveaway. But no, where are we? We're a lot better than the States. And I did some training, research in the States. Yeah, and I was surprised. I was in Lexington, Kentucky when I was a student, and that was an eye opener too. So yeah, I hope this has been of use. I think so I made this video about extractions because lots of people are too twitchy about doing extractions, and the thing about it is that they don't, sometimes with the best will in the world you don't get the best outcome. And then you start working in a protective manner, and I don't think I ever worried too much about it. And back then, if you left an apical third, it depends whose apical third it was. For some people, it was more like a apical half or apical 3/4. But generally, we know if you're doing the right thing. Taking out root-filled teeth, well, that's a nightmare. I mean. Yeah, so there are lots of different things, but we need to be supporting one another. And just because someone has discomfort after an extraction, that's not a poor outcome, it's just life. Well, maybe it's not quite so bad, but oh yeah, so that was these are my patients, some x-rays from my patients. Yeah, and that was a root filling. I'll talk about root fillings another time. And yeah, at the end, I don't know why people do dentistry, but this was my main reason. And because I had such a rough start, I ended up being a trainer because I thought I don't want anyone to have a start like I've had. And the problem with the training is that you get a lot of the defence organisations scaring dentists into, having been a trainer for 20 years, I found that the recently qualified dentists were more and more anxious to, and they took a lot more hands-on training because they didn't get enough training at the dental school, nothing like what I had as hands-on experience. And also you tend to want to do the things that, which is fair enough, is going to make it the easiest and easy money. But that's not good for all of us. It's certainly not good for the general population. So I hope you found this useful. And then I moved to Bristol. Whoa, that didn't go well.